make it less painful, maybe even enjoyable. And it's a process that of course crosses over many different disciplines within an organization and has a lot of moving parts, aka a lot of people interacting on various fronts. Then we will go down why it matters to us and my role, and finally we'll go on with some next steps on how you might get it into your organization.
Maybe some Q&A at the end, but if you have questions, feel free to ask in the middle. Don't wait till the end. So who are we? Well, Datacron Group's based in Kirkland. Been around for a couple of years here. We've got approximately 25 consultants on staff, about 30 in the company. So it's got a bit of a startup feel to it. The website's right there if you guys want to go check us out and see what kind of services we provide and all that stuff. I'm Nimret Sandhu. I'm a lead dev for Datacron. I've been with Datacron for about 2.5 years now or something like that. Been programming since kind of the mid-90s. Started out with Visual C++, Windows, and embedded systems work. Done mobile, server-side, client-side, but I've been doing mostly Java since the late 90s. And I've been doing some various aspects of CI, continuous delivery kind of stuff, probably since the mid-2000s, I would say, early to mid-2000s. Okay.
Also a lead developer here at Datacron, been here for about 3 years, doing mainly software development. I tend to be focused on the SDET and developer tracks and understanding how sort of that core fits in. Obviously there's things outside of there that are important too, but that tends to be my focus. Java almost my entire career. It came in late enough to just swing in and be Java all the way, so that may be tragic or great depending on your perspective. So.
All right, so let's see, next slide. So who are you guys? Just out of curiosity, we can do a little bit of a poll or kind of get a feel for the audience. So how many devs do we have here, like individual contributors, testers, people who code every day? Okay. And project managers, people who kind of manage projects, might have come from a dev background. Cool. And then anybody else who didn't raise their hand? So what do you do?
Configuration release management.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, that's right. That's I guess that would these days kind of start falling into the dev role, but in terms of tools and automation and things like that. But it is a role by itself. Absolutely. And then out of curiosity, how many people already started down the continuous delivery path? So I have like some aspects of continuous delivery already going, CI, automation, like that. Okay, cool. All right.
All right, so what is continuous delivery? We pulled the Wikipedia definition here just to kind of point out that it is a more broad concept. It's not some invented concept here. It's principles and practices for improving the process of software delivery. That's important because we spend a lot of our time doing this. It's very expensive to deliver software. It's hard. It's error prone. I think we've all been, again, back to my pain point, we've all been through the pains of doing it. The goal, of course, is to end up with a repeatable process for software delivery that has as much automation and quality built into it as possible, and to be able to do it as often as is needed by the business. I think in most cases we've been through or we're currently in an environment where a release is a painful thing. The goal is to make releases less painful, perhaps even not painful at all. So, does anyone have the stickies done? Did they end up somewhere? All right.
There you go.
So, frequency of deployments and reducing the pain that comes with manual deployments. That is one of my favorite things to attempt to eliminate in any software process. Not yet.
No, this is a cool one.
Yeah.
Founding a continuous delivery company. So that's actually good because I found, and I've kind of on some of the mailing lists that I've been on, I've noticed that applying some of these concepts to not just software development, but even other things in life can actually be pretty advantageous, whether it's starting a company or, like, for myself personally, you know, I try to kind of keep a backlog of all the things that I need to get done, keep pulling items from the backlog. Some of you guys are shaking your heads because you heard some of these terms before. But some of these same sort of concepts and principles can actually be applied in not just software development, but say manufacturing, which is actually where some of the stuff comes from, or a lot of other fields out there.
I want to learn about continuous delivery because the current build delivery systems and processes are very disjointed and painful. I think we have a theme, so.
Yep. Challenge of incorporating testing and QA on rapid development. Same sort of thing.
Keeping agile skills up to date and sharp. That sounds very much developerish. Maybe I'm wrong.
Was on team that used it but was not involved with maintaining it. Okay.
As a process lead and coach, I need to learn as much as possible. We're actively pursuing.
It's a good one. Continuous test for deployment, mitigating risk. So yeah, mitigating risk is definitely. I'm sure that every company would agree that that's a good thing to have, and probably everybody in a company would agree. I'm sure you don't want to be the person who ended up, you know, screwing up the deployment or got the prod and test systems mixed up or something like that, so that the credit card numbers are going to the test system or something like that.
I'd like to see what other technologies and techniques other organizations are using to achieve continuous delivery.
I like this one. So that I have a high-level canned answer for my CIO. You're at the right place.
Wow, that's a. I'd like to see examples of how to get software from my CI system to production using when an ops group typically oversees the prod machines. Ah, there's the classic configuration right there. So.
And I want to understand how to integrate with unit and functional testing. Yep.
Make deployments more efficient, less painful. Okay, I don't already. And last, because I'm setting up a framework for CI for my company. Cool. All right, we will do our best to address as much of that as possible. I'm going to do a quick straw poll here. Just raise your hand if they did. How long does a build take? Whose average build take? Sorry, not build. How long does a release take? Whose average release takes more than 4 hours?
Depends which company.
Just 3? That's pretty good. So whose releases take under an hour?
What are you calling a release?
To production. There are many releases. We'll get
So
to that.
you're
in a
talking
second.
about the duration of the maintenance window?
I'm talking about getting the code into production. Yes.
The time the system
You
goes
mean
down,
including
right?
testing, UAT, I don't know.
No. Sorry, not the entire software development lifecycle. Sorry, just the end deployment, the end pushing of the artifacts. Can we try that again? Then who's over 8 hours for that? Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
over
right.
8 hours.
Yeah.
One
Depends on the product.
Your product.
It can, and
We have lots
People
of them,
products.
and the amount of infrastructure, the need to have a rollback plan, or the lack of a rollback plan, you know, and that it is, of course, manual. Many systems as subsystems
Right.
for a really big system.
right.
Yeah, it gets big, and we have custom implementations on a per customer basis and hundreds of customers.
Yeah, it makes it
So-
tough, certainly. No, I'd say, but
Yeah.
that's the point. There is pain in build, just in the amount of time it takes. So who would say their release process, the actual releasing of the artifacts to production, is successful in their eyes? Maybe 10th.
How do you define success?
How do you-
Right? You know, that's
It's a feeling, right? I mean,
Sure.
you can't. We're not
Yeah.
like the metrics for success.
Right.
So, no, it is a feeling. So
It works.
if you don't feel like, yeah,
But
it
it's
works is
pretty-
never my metric for anything, because we can do amazingly bad things at the it works level, and I've been there. I think we all have. One of my favorites here. Do you have any heroes in the build process or in the release process that sort of come out of the woodwork and are able to, you know, jimmy up this system to be able to get this crazy network connectivity going? You know, in the middle of the process, you're on the phone. It's like, oh, I got this. You know, I hate hearing, oh, I got this ever in a release. There should be a button that replaces that particular task. All right, and then there's some other ones that are just, classic things. Do your environments match? Do you know your environments match? In a lot of places, my experience is we don't really know.
Or do you have separate environments?
What do you mean by your environment's mapped?
So let's say you have, you're deploying to 20 prod systems, and you've got, some on the East Coast, some on the West Coast, some in Europe.
Okay.
Do you know the configuration is all good on all of them? Do you know the versions of everything that are running out there? Do you know that all of the network configuration is the same? Or where there's deviations, you know the deviations? My experience is that is almost always no. It's not always no, but it's almost always no, where people say, well, that's good except, Jack deals with the routers. And we go to him and it's almost like he's the configuration, and that's not something you want. And then, how hard is it to patch? How hard is it to release? Are these things, on different scales for you? So. All right, and then we actually, wait. Okay, so this sort of describes the process that prior to continuous delivery, you tend to feel like the process behaves like this picture looks. Somebody specifies a story or some specifications, and they're a little fuzzy. It's not entirely clear. Development may put in some unit tests. I know in this day and age, I wish, and I hope everybody has a huge unit test suite, but I have also experienced that's not always the case. Your CI may run. Here's one of my favorites. You have a CI system, and it's allowed to be broken all the time. It's the warning light on your dash that says engine check. I don't know what that does, but the car's running. So you come over to test, and this is where, this is my sweet spot. This is where I like between dev and test, and I love that sort of interaction. Everything's manual, and so you might get an artifact tossed over the wall. There's a bunch of manual tests. Now, this is the part where, when you talk about the whole software development lifecycle, and when you ask what a release is, this is the part where maybe you have an artifact that you're pretty comfortable with, and 3 weeks of exhaustive testing need to occur with a lot of people touching it to make sure that yeah.
So you're starting to approach it. Do you have any business even starting that continuous deployment conversation if you're just going to let all your stuff roll downhill?
No, absolutely, right.
I mean, you talked about the unit test. What are you discovering at the point of development? Or are you just going to let QA handle it? Or are you just going to let customers deal with it? Because honestly, a repeatable build is beginning. It should have a significant amount of developer level functional kinds of tests. You shouldn't release it on QA.
Oh yeah.
And letting it flow into other people's cost center or whatever, you had no business doing that. You should not be talking about
right. And
anything more than fixing your development processes.
And that's a very good point, but it's actually an interesting thing in all of this that this is the picture a lot of organizations are in, and some of it is about just tossing it over the fence, letting it flow to the next group, and so a lot of us have a sphere of influence, and so at some level, your goal is to get your sphere of influence toward continuous delivery, because you're right, ideally it should be up the chain, but if you say, I'm not taking anything from development unless their house is in order, I don't know how many folks are actually in QA automation sort of stuff. Can you imagine saying, no, your house has to be entirely in order? It can't
If
happen.
you're Flickr, let it fly.
Yeah.
If you're E-Trade, probably a mistake.
Yeah, well, and in fact, a lot of cases it gets into the politics of this. This is a political issue in a lot of cases because you're trying to tie together a disparate group of people with different skill sets, different needs, and drive a quality and automation throughout the organization and throughout the process. That's a difficult thing to do. All right, so let's see. Did we touch on everything so painful releases? Cards touch on that. Inability to predict delivery affecting current business or affecting business commitments. We actually didn't really touch on that on any of the cards, but that's the classic. How do you tie the work that you're getting through to what came out the other end. It's important to know that what you are attempting to produce is actually being produced, and it's being produced like you want it. Deployment to environments, talked about that. Code quality, you kind of touch on that, which is, at its core, code quality is critical to all of continuous delivery. The higher the quality of the code, the easier and the better each of your automated processes can become. I don't know, this is anecdotal, and so I don't know which company it was, Hyundai or Kia, but the CEO was talking about automating.
Same company.
Are they the same company?
Hyundai owns Kia.
I don't like it. Okay, well there you go. So they were talking about automating, and they said, well, automation improved their quality, which allowed them to automate, which allowed them to improve their quality. So it's a virtuous cycle, because as you automate and you're able to remove tasks that are painful for everybody, you can put more time into improving your code and improving your delivery cycle. So, all right. I touched on configuration management there, and you should know what all of your environments are. QA can be expensive, time-consuming, manual, frustrating. Partial agile. I gotta say, agile is one of the hardest things to do anything but partial agile. So, I've been in a true XP shop, and I remember that as being not the nirvana that was promised, but it was interesting. So. All right, so this is the target state. Now, at least the picture, nicely flows together, but the real key here is that there are artifacts at each point that are built through automation, and the artifacts are what you're handing off. You're not sending an email to notify somebody that there's some story changes. You have a bug tracker, you're tying that in, you're saying that I've made a change to this, there's a log about why. Once you get into test, there's automation. You can look up all the tests that have passed. You know they're passing regularly. Into development, you're producing an artifact. You're not producing like I'm not saying, hey, I got the dev build on my box. I built it for you guys. Everyone can have it. It's coming out of a central repository. You have your SA, not SSH checks. You have your checks on it. We have test again before we get to prod, and then when you're actually releasing it, you're again releasing an artifact that you have a long chain of custody on. You can verify from the story specification all the way through into configured environments that you control.
So are you proposing test-driven development?
I like test-driven development. I am not proposing test-driven development.
Okay. No, I'm just because you have this test box, the second box, and then you do development, right? So in my mind, okay, you have the requirements, then you do acceptance test, then you do development. That's TDD.
That is TDD. I'm torn on TDD because I still struggle with, and this is a personal flaw of mine, I have not totally embraced the BDD side of it, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I am a TDD on my own code. So that's where, certainly these tests in that dev cycle, this may be a circle, right? Maybe a feedback loop on itself. But
First test box acceptance test.
No, it's just, so this is just illustrating that basically there is a continuous process around, testing and development. And you could have, your test scenarios and your development work kind of happening concurrently. And this is going back to what somebody mentioned earlier, that I think it was you, that you really want, QA and other groups involved in analyzing the requirements, making sure that they actually make sense. They're going to bring a different perspective to looking at that than a dev might, who's maybe thinking it's just happy path or something like that. And so, yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in the agile world, we've started talking about whether it's ATDD or BDD or it was always good practice to do some kind of review, some kind of contemplation of whether this thing was testable, whether it was ambiguous.
Yeah.
And that should be happening before. And a good story, we talked a while back about, on the back of it, right, how you're going to test this.
Right.
So, in my mind, whatever you want to call it, if you're not figuring out early on how you're going to test it,
Right.
maybe you're not writing any code,
Right.
or true BDD, but I think that's the right order.
Well, yeah, I mean, the point there is though that it's kind of a rotating cycle, that basically
Yeah.
those things are kind of happening concurrently. And
Yeah.
it's not, the old sort of waterfall style.
The binary repository thing, what is that? Is that a drop folder? Is that artifact?
We will get to
We'll
that.
get to that.
Okay.
And yes, possibly, and yes, possibly.
Okay.
So,
As long as-
Not a folder.
not a folder.
Thank you.
I thought Dropbox is what we're gonna do for everyone, so. Yeah. All right, so why not? This is the part that I find very interesting. There are often a lot of tools, just as a very simple example, that are required to be in place. If you're coming from a place, and I hope no one here is, but where version control is, hey, it's in this folder, then certainly, Maven might be there, but certainly your CI is probably not doing all that it could. New processes. This also is tough. You've got to get people introduced to these processes, which means socializing them within organizations, which means evangelizing sometimes within your groups. Organizational impact. This is also a large one. Cross-functional buy-in. Again, if you're very siloed, and sort of back again to the letting it flow downhill. If you're very siloed, and in fact, we had a question there about ops controlling production. So you're very siloed, and ops controls everything from that gate. How can you get continuous delivery? At some point, that may be where you're driving toward it by saying, look, we have development happening regularly, we have high build quality, we have full QA, we know every day that we have an excellent build we can hand you. Move the pressure down, move the pressure off of your group or your groups, and put a little pressure on the outside. You're just trying to encourage the other teams to, to accept that this is a better way to do it. Cross-functional means it's always harder, and you always have to do more socializing, more evangelizing, more convincing. So I don't think there's a good way around that, unless, if you figure out a way, let me know. So,
Are you going to address the cost or cost savings that go along with this? Because I've experienced a lot of pushback on trying to do things the right way, from more of a, intellectually it makes sense, but tying it down to numbers and say, if you'll, ops, if you'll take this, this new approach, we save some money. And being able to say you save a lot of money, a lot of times makes it easy.
yeah, I
But
agree.
just saying it's the right thing to do,
No,
conceptually, is kind of a poor argument usually.
It is, but I've also found the money argument is not always as effective as you might imagine, because what you're saying is, trust me, here's the money argument, or here's another example, and people are very good at picking out, whoa, that's good, but here you forget that we have to operate 24/7 on two coasts. That example you have is only tied to a small data center, in Seattle. It's like, well, they pull things out to say that. So the best examples are often actual successes. If you can say, look, try this on a pilot level, let's check the ROI on it, see how it looks. That's where you can get a convincing conversation with. That's back to the evangelizing, back to the socializing, back to the driving the human factor on this. Because you're right, it's very hard to convince people on no, this is the right way, because the right way is completely arbitrary. So.
Just to reiterate with what you just said, the way we did it over at General Electric is we left the legacy stuff the way it was, but any of the new product initiatives were done in this new fashion, and we took measurements of legacy, and as well as the new way, and turned it into a Six Sigma project, and could tie that back to the company's goals, and kind of a Y equals F of X. This is the X, that's feeding into the company's
Yeah.
efficiency and effectiveness and speed to market.
Yeah, I was going to say, even the premise that continuous deployment is automatically a good thing, and the idea that it's just a technical decision, it's really not. The SLA matters, the customer matters. If he wants 10 days notice before you touch his box, he gets 10 days notice. And if you can only deploy so often, because whatever the constraints are, doing it every 2 weeks is still better than doing it every 6 months. And testing it more often than you deploy. There are lots of tests that we don't necessarily run all the time that are worth running at least periodically.
So you bring a good point, and I should have brought that up earlier. Continuous delivery is not automatic delivery. And this is very critical because we're not saying you hit a button and it just flows through the system and is deployed. You can still have checks and balances in there. Again, if your delivery window is every 2 weeks and you have systems that won't allow you to do it, you can still do that in a continuous delivery fashion. You bring it up to that gate, you have an artifact that is sitting there and is vetted, and once the gate is open, you push it. So it's not like when you say that, it makes me think of automatic, like, you know, so like it's an out of control AI just running through releasing for you, you know.
In terms of like selling some of these processes and things like that to other organizations within the company, it's always easier to sell it piecemeal, or just, you know, make suggestions around like, okay, you know, like what was the thing that was the most painful for them last time around or something like that, and you know, suggest maybe, you know, you could do something about that, because there's always some levels of automation that are already there. It's not like, you know, that there's no automation at all. So it's just sort of trying to get people to get, you know, a buy-in. It's always easier to transition people to something rather than, you know, kind of leaving them off the deep end. George?
Are you going to be talking about staged environments and continuous delivery to the first stage?
No, not during. This is a fairly high. Sorry, Will.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a term. I'm Will. I'm the CTO for Dynacron Group. There's a little bit of a terminology thing, right? So there's continuous integration, right? That's Jenkins, TeamCity, running build. Continuous delivery, which is this whole process that these guys are talking about. And then there's a third one, which is continuous deployment, which I think is kind of more what you were talking about. Those are very different things. The continuous deployment one was actually made famous by a company, IMVU. They did a piece of software, it was a chat package, but they had set it up so that they had so many automated tests that they felt that they could do deployments. They were doing deployments to end customers, you know, dozens of times a day. So they had hit that level and that bar. Part of what for us is a big thing is we talk a lot about maturity models in terms of where you're at, and you don't want to get too worried about the later stages. For example, one of the things that we talk about is split testing software, having multiple versions of software in production simultaneously so you can use analytics to figure out which one works best, right? We go talk to people where they don't even use source control. And so, you know, talking about that kind of stuff is so science fiction. I might as well just be talking about transwarp drives or something. So part of it, and I think as we go through the rest of this presentation, you know, just because you can't get to the end state doesn't mean that you shouldn't be trying. And that's sort of thematically, I think, where this presentation's going. So the final stages exist. We've done them. We've worked with companies that have gotten to that point. But you know, that's just how far can you push, and just more think about it in terms of, well, where am I today? What's realistic in, say, 6 months to achieve, and celebrate success when you get there. You know?
All right, so last two on this slide just to go over. Continuous delivery may be heavily supported by new designs, either introducing new processes for, new designs for how you create environments. You know, this is where the cloud may come in as a way to ramp up environments quickly. Maybe you need a stateless system because your current system is just too hard to deploy without bringing everything down or up. I mean, there's a wide variety of systems out there.
So we've got a bit of a matrix over here over some of the concepts that are useful to know in this space, and some of the sort of groups that deal with them. The keys kind of down there, the one with the bar there talks about, you know, folks should kind of understand some of these concepts, and the one with the diamond talks about the actual technical implementation of some of those concepts. So I'm just going to kind of run through some of these concepts down real quick. And you know, if anybody wants me to drill on any one specifically because I never heard of it or something, feel free to ask. So agile processes, Scrum, Kanban, XP, you know, pretty much, in my opinion, everybody should be ideally following that. Even management, but you know, again, places do that to varying degrees. Unit testing generally kind of more, you know, QA development. They're kind of more in their domain. And then functional web testing or functional testing kind of falls more in the QA domain. but obviously, like everybody in the organization needs to be aware of it. Developers can help out in that side too. It's actually always a great idea to have, you know, maybe a rotation or something, and let, you know, some of the devs maybe work on the QA side or something like that, or vice versa. Because ideally, you don't want that sort of distinction there, in my opinion at least, especially with automation, because estimates these days are basically developers who have more of a focus on QA. Test-driven development, again, everybody should sort of be aware of it, but it's mostly a QA and dev thing. Same for continuous integration. So binary repository, I think somebody was asking about what that is. So that's basically their tools that let you store artifacts of builds, usually release builds. And so the idea there is that whenever you're doing deployments to environments, you're always going to that spot to get the build, and then it also has auditing information about, you know, who did the build, what was in it, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, it was just, the reason I was partly asking is, I know that we're using it, but, you know, when you talk about people who are struggling to have source control, how many people even know that this is, to me, what modern development looks
It's
like?
varying degrees, so,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, just a quick comment on the binary repository. The most popular products are Artifactory and Nexus.
Right.
All very consistently we go in and those are not set up properly, so we wind up having to help people understand things like, you know, don't put snapshots in there. This is how the versioning structure is supposed to work. This is where the docs are supposed to go. So even though they might have Maven or Artifactory or Nexus set up, we'll go in and help them. Part of the big point there is that that's a static place where all these artifacts go, and there's one and only one of them with a version number. So that's one piece. So if I have version 1.37.8, there is one and only one, 137.8. And then the other thing is that these are cheap, right? You know, it used to be like, oh, well, binaries, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like 10 meg. That's like 4 floppies, right? Nowadays, you can have have an environment kicking off a build and storing all of the assets related to a release, and release we'll talk about in a minute. All of those can go in that repository, and they should be there, and they become a consistent place.
Well, it's not even necessarily just your built product, it's things that you pull from the web, your tooling and so on, so that you have
You mean like
consistent-
third party?
Yeah, so that build environments and so on can be consistent.
Yep, you can certainly have them acting as like caching proxies, yep.
One guy in my organization, he's completely against the binary repository. He wants everything rebuilt from the back. So, oh man. So I need to, after this class, I can convince him not to allow
always
to
gonna be
store the
scroll.
artifacts. He doesn't want any artifact, so.
Yep, interesting. George?
So I'm from the camp that says that your binary artifacts, third-party ones, should be in your source control tree. So why would you not want to do that?
Yeah, so you're right, and they are kept that way, at least in my experience with some of the newer continuous deployment models, which is, there apparently is a distinction between that and continuous delivery, which I'm learning in this presentation. But so you've got these work streams that come through your organization, right? And one of them is building the application itself, and another is maybe building the infrastructure for it. And the idea nowadays is that we're modeling the infrastructure as code. So you can have developers working on codifying the infrastructure, if you will, at the same time the developers are codifying the application. And so all that would go into a configuration management system. But later in the process, we're going to be keeping track of different things. And these are going to be the packaging and the third-party libraries. And they're going to be packaged and deployed in different ways. Like, for example, on Linux, you use Yum. You know, you might be using some Ruby Omnibus. There's a lot of different technologies that you can use, and it's a different set of work products, and they're kept in a further downstream
So do
from the
you do
configuration
software
management.
escrow kind of activities where there's a third party that, and GE's probably not going anywhere, but I've definitely been
Well, no,
places
this was
where
at
it helps to
Comcast.
sell, you know, like into, I did medical systems, hospital information systems for a time, getting into the bigger hospital markets. They wanted to know that if our company disappears tomorrow, someone, you know, they could rebuild it, they know where all the pieces are. It's not gonna get touched, it's not, you know, nothing will happen unless we go away, but they're not left out in the cold.
Who cares? You have to
Well, I
do
mean, yeah, well,
Customers.
yeah, certain customers think that's awesome. And I didn't know, I can see both of the approaches being escrowable, but also how much do you want to maintain as your personal
Right.
store? I don't know.
So George, what do you guys use for source control? Or I mean, because different source control systems have different levels of support for something like that, right? In terms of like binary data within the source tree.
Well, so I've worked with Perforce, I've worked with Subversion, and both of them allow for binary objects in the tree, and as part of the, and so does Git for that matter.
Yeah, it gets a lot better with
Right.
dealing with
And of course,
stuff
it
like that.
doesn't cost that much if you're putting the same thing in over and over and over again.
Right.
Git, whereas in Subversion, you don't. But to me, the issue was one of, the question is who is authorized to move a third-party jar forward?
So what do you use for a build system?
Well, that depends. Right now, I have my own, and
Okay.
and
So
when I was at previously, they have their own,
yeah.
and when I was at WDS, we used Maven and blah blah. You know.
But that depends, right? So I mean, if you're using Maven, for example, then you're not actually maintaining the binaries.
Well, it depends upon if you're using that part of Maven.
Fair enough, so.
Okay.
I mean, because when I was at Expedia, they had Ivy, and it was a nightmare because they would just use the stars
Oh.
for their dependency management, and it's like you couldn't build in your IDE, so you had to run externally, which updated the jars, and suddenly you don't know whether the failure of your test is because someone has slipstreamed in a new jar, or whether it's the code that you changed. I had 12 different build environments so that I could be careful about, because I had to have 4 or 5 projects working at the same time, so that waiting for code reviews. But my point is that each one of those had different versions so that I could say, oh, it's not working? Let's go refresh it over here where I haven't touched it to see if it doesn't work over there also.
So let's move this to the end if we're
sorry.
going to keep talking. Yeah, so we can have a little afternoon left. So we can.
Dependencies are always fun.
Yeah.
So we just talked about version control. Again, more QA, dev, and IT would be sort of working with that. And we'll get to that in a little bit in terms of DevOps automation, because you might be wondering, why would IT be mucking around in source control? Stateless architecture, that's more of an architectural concern, but again, that's something that probably devs would be working with, but again, everybody would kind of need to understand it. And then of course, in the environments themselves, it's really mostly IT that's working with it, but everybody needs to have a good idea of what it is, business side from a cost perspective, and dev and QA in terms of how it's implemented. So here's a bit of a project manager's view on all these sort of things. Ideally, you want everything to be agile. Agile is good. You want everything to be iterative. You want to try and reduce your risk as much as you can. I don't know if everybody's already familiar with Agile, Scrum, and some of the processes and what they allow you to do, but breaking things into smaller chunks just means that you can shift that much more quickly when you want to. This does not mean you just start typing code right off the bat. You can certainly apply those same concepts to design, to mock-ups, to whatever. But the point there is that you're doing it in chunks and increments, and you're not doing really, really long projects, and your check-in isn't after like a few weeks or a few months. Unit functional tests, test-driven development, we kind of touched on that. Ideally, you want your tests to sort of be developed concurrently as the development is occurring. And going back to having QA involved, right in the beginning of that process, it's important because that way everybody's on the same page. The people requesting the feature, your product owner, the developer is going to be developing it, QA who's going to be responsible for ensuring that it meets the requirements and the quality is good. The nice thing about having everything automated and having tests around all your features is that your regressions are really, really simple. You just run your test suite, and that's it. You're done. They're not painful. The quality of the test suite, on the other hand, is a whole different thing. Continuous integration is nice because that, again, that it solidifies the ongoing work, the meaning of being done. So once you have this process up and running and it's working for you, you can keep churning out stuff on a periodic basis. And you know that the stuff that's coming out is good quality stuff that, because it's been vetted by all the groups that are working together. And then the binary repository, we kind of touched on that. That really helps in having a central location where things are versioned, you know what's going in there, and you know that that's the one spot you can pick things up from and deploy it to all the various environments. There's no patches being sneaked in here or there, or there's no like dev builds that are being done on a dev's box or something like that are being deployed here and there. Questions? So here's sort of an example, kind of illustrating what I'm talking about. So one of the tools that we used out there is Rally. So here's an example of like some story or some feature that's been written in Rally, and maybe it has some sort of a feature number or something like that, story 25431. And so you start kind of thinking about some of the tests that are going to be done to ensure that it works. And so they're just going to be roughed out, so you're just going to have a rough outline of what the tests are going to do. They're just work in progress. So they're not actual, they don't have all the functionality, but they're just kind of shells. And then at the same time, while that's being done, the story is being implemented by development. And then you sort of have this iterative process, hopefully a lot of pair programming going on, where dev and QA are kind of working together, where devs are like building out the feature and QA is like, oh, did you think of that or something like that, and the devs, as they're building out, they're like, oh, here's something that maybe we didn't think about from a business requirements perspective or something like that. And eventually, dev's done with the story, QA is done with the testing, all that code gets checked in. Hopefully, I don't know, best practice is to have like the story number or some sort of an identifier that can go in with the check-in, so you can tie back that check-in to what the requirement was. Not all places do that, but that's a nice thing to do from a practice perspective. And then eventually you have some sort of a release process or something like that that ideally automatically pulls those commits or something like that into a release document and assembles everything in the binary repository. Then all you have to do is send around an email with a pointer to that saying, hey, release so-and-so is ready for deployment to QA. It has these 10 features or something like that. And that way there's no confusion about what's in a release, what's not in a release, what's missing, what does it contain or doesn't contain, or which version number it is, or anything of that sort. So the point is, though, that everything is automated and it's traceable. So you have as much automation in place, passing around pointers, you're not passing around data, and it's traceable, and there's auditability about what the feature was, which build it got put in, and where it's available.
So, as I said before, I love the core of software development. And one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest needs that you tend to see is in the QA part of an organization. You see a lot of manual testing going on. You see a lot of difficult, long processes. I was at a client and they said, we don't test all of our app because that would take too long. That's it's horrifying, right? I mean, it's and then they're like, well, we find bugs in production and we patch. Well, of course you do, because you can't test all of it, right? So that's the biggest shift. I think in a lot of organizations, especially today, that is the biggest single shift you can do, is moving towards an automated QA setup, because it's the biggest bang for the buck. It can improve your processes and your quality. All of these things are important, but it is huge to be able to move to automated QA. So I do like the point there that it vastly reduces stress, having good automated QA. And that's solidly true. There's nothing worse than the long wait while people click on your product. And I don't know, I think everyone's done that. Is that, hopefully? All right, so a couple of examples of tools that we've been using that we found to be very helpful to us. Selenium is one. How many folks have used Selenium in their organizations? All right, so preaching to the choir. Okay. So we found that people love starting here. You know, it's like, oh gosh, I can record something and I have a playback. But where we want to get is here, because the recorder is great for static things. None of the work any of us do is static. If that was the case, it would be a design shop and they would be cranking out comps, and that's what we would be looking at. There's all sorts of elements that are programmable, testable. You can build out a wide variety of parameters to all this stuff. Very tough to do if you're just building out pre-recorded scripts. You could end up with thousands of them. It is test automation. SDET, software developer in test, engineer in test. So this is a software development discipline, and that's important. That's, again, a mind shift, and I will say it is still a very difficult mind shift in this industry. When I say QA, a lot of managers say, right, that's the guy that clicks on things. When you say, no, it's a software developer, they're like, no, that's the guy that builds the things that get clicked on. They don't say that in their head, their eyes glaze over and they're like, yeah, that guy's a QA guy, got it. So, next, Sauce Labs. Who's familiar with Sauce Labs? Okay, Sauce Labs is Selenium in the cloud. And this is important because I want you guys to imagine it's crunch time. We have 1 week to deploy this product. We need 5 browsers, and it needs to be perfect on all of them. And we want to get this done quick. Okay, so can you imagine how much of a test automation lab that's going to require? 50 machines, 100 machines to do it in a reasonable parallel manner? I don't want to build that. I'm sure all of us could build that. Take 6 months, build out your own QA lab. I'd much rather have somebody else do it, and Sauce Labs does a good job of it. They show you the whole script of what was run. You can even see a video of what was played back. It's automated Selenium in the cloud. Okay, it's an instant QA lab, exactly. So this is really important because the cost of building out a QA lab is very high. This reduces it to just doing it when you need to have it done. This is great. And they're honestly, just from a pure wow factor, when you're sitting in front of management to be able to say, upper management, look, here's a video of our product playing. That kind of stuff is helpful for that socializing, that sales part of what we do. So
That 15-minute part is not too bad either.
right. So sorry, and you do parallel execution. That's absolutely critical. Especially when you have a big product, 5 browsers. If it wasn't parallel, again, it could be the rest of your natural life, just automate. So.
There's an open source project on GitHub that's around parallelizing the execution of the tests right there,
Yes, we do.
in case anybody's interested in looking at it.
All right, developer's view. Okay, so I think I've asked every other question. Who is directly a developer? Okay, seems like we've got just the perfect mix of everyone doing everything. So the goal here is this. You want to spend a lot more of your time working on code, producing quality code. This is the most important thing from my perspective. I'm a developer at heart, that's what I love. So there's nothing I hate more than spending hours on a manual process. That's what's the classic axiom that a good developer is a lazy developer. They see a process, they've done it twice, they've automated it. That's what we want to see. And so we want people to be, this part here too, comfortable with refactoring. Your code should always be improving. I don't know how many times, is anyone familiar with the drop cement around it approach? Chernobyl? Chernobyl goes off, it was horrible, what are we going to do? We'll just pour a lot of cement on it, and then Chernobyl doesn't bother us anymore. So, who hasn't experienced a little bit of cement code where you're like, yeah, Tim worked on that, and I don't ever want to touch that. We're going to cement it, maybe have a little hole so that the interface can poke out and pray that it never changes. We don't want that. When I'm working, it's constant improvement. Part of your code reviews is saying, hey folks, that's not good enough. Don't be lazy. That's just, it builds in on it. And oh yeah, never here works on my machine again. That I will admit I said that recently. It was terrible, and it was to a guy in QA. So I really have lots of mea culpas. All right, so we want to get to the definition of done. A lot of this is Agile stuff. So if you want to dive deeper into that, we can dive into Agile at some point. because that helps out a lot with this part. Back to release. What is a release? There are many types of releases. A local build is, in effect, a small release of your product, and it will run locally or even in the cloud or wherever you want it to run. How many people have ever had a local release go to production? There you go. Some honesty. Excellent. All right. A release build for us is the next level up, where it's gone through your CI, it's gone through your unit tests, and it's ready for more rigorous approaches into a deployable release, which is something you can and should put on an environment. We're trying to build up a pyramid of quality underneath it. A customer release might be put into production. Note that in this case, a deployable release, a release build, and a customer release may all be the same release. But from the standpoint of what your organization does with it, this is much more important to them, even though the bits are exactly the same. And back to the gating, what we were talking about earlier. Finally, a marketing release. This is critical. Windows 7 is not called Windows 14,836 because of the build that came out of the build number. There is an odd habit in development to release things with the same release number that you get out of your CI environments. I don't understand it, but we do have a bad habit there. Questions or? Yep. All right. And back to the binary repository. So, developer commits to some form of source control. We say source there, but source control is implied in everything we do. Continuous integration runs the test on the source code from source control, never from a local box, never from a shared directory. The output of that might get checked back in. In fact, we will tag. The CI will tag for you. The CI will do a few other automated things. Again, we're trying to establish a chain of custody here. We know developer X worked on it. We know it was built and succeeded at this time. It was checked back in. We push it to the binary repository. You should be able to follow exactly where every artifact came all the way back up the chain. This is important, especially if you've got standards bodies that are demanding that you prove that where your artifacts came from. It's also important to people who say, wait a minute, who worked on that? Where's the problem? Let's get to the source of it. Finally, the binary repository takes the artifact, pushes it over into QA, into staging, into prod. It is the source of the bits that go out anywhere your organization is sending it.
I think I understand the value of this run test before committing to source control, but mechanically, how does the developer, what is the developer committing to? If they're not committing to their Hudson instance, they're committing to the version control thing, right?
There's two answers to this, and they're both a bit different. One, I believe Bamboo and TeamCity both offer, and this is in the Java space. I believe also even in the .NET space, Microsoft has a pre-commit kind of
Gated check-in, TFS.
Yep. So gated check-in. So that's one approach. The other one is if you're using distributed version control and feature branches, you can build the feature branch and have the CI gate emerge up.
Okay.
So there are multiple approaches to this, and it will be tailored somewhat to your tool choice. And again, it ties all the way back into those tools you start at the beginning and you bring all the way through. It might be that you can't do some of this stuff because you don't have enough tooling underneath. Well, you have to you have to improve your tooling to get to where you can do this.
Okay.
I have a question on one line. You have broken builds, notify the developer immediately without breaking build. So if you don't break the build, how do you have a broken build?
Well, that's terrible wording. No, no, that's just, no, it's,
To break the
don't
build
break-
without check-ins, right?
you don't break the downstream build. So
Okay.
if you think about,
I know what you're talking about. You're
Right.
talking about where they would do testing before check-in,
Mhm.
and then if it doesn't work, so you only check in where code that works.
Right.
And so they build locally.
Who's on Subversion in here? Wow. Okay, so Git? What are you guys on? Okay.
Perforce?
I'm not sure what we're not on.
There's some honesty.
It's, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
PVCS,
fair enough, fair enough.
Perforce. We don't have ClearCase. Some old source safe, CVS,
RCS?
PVCS, no RCS.
All right. So, so some of this is choice of version control is going to make some of this easier. But there are tools for probably all of those to allow that sort of, you check in a change set, it applies it to the code, and then it applies the change set and commits it.
The point is, it's important to have the process in place, because if you check in stuff that breaks mainline, whether it's compilation issues, library dependencies, tests not working, whatever, depending on your organization size, that could be a large pain point for a large number of people. And this is the continuous improvement part. If you don't address that, then it's one of those things where it's just going to keep happening over and over again, and pretty soon you sort of become immune to it, but that's not a healthy state to be in.
Yeah, a lot of places they would hand around like a little ugly doll or something because you're the last guy who broke the build or whatever. you know what I'm talking about, right?
We've used that because
Yeah.
I come into projects and they're not ready for that, so we created Stanky, which we can
Stanky the build skunk.
Yep.
There we go.
And so that was just to get people to understand that it was important.
Yep.
And we had one girl who just hated Stanky. Would do anything in her power not to break the build. And that's coming from an environment where she was like, yeah, tests are just sort of there, and they break. So it can be a pretty powerful social oh, you got Stanky, you screwed up. So
Well, and that's part of that transition, right?
yeah, that's
So,
a transition thing.
having Stanky the skunk is like one place, but there are so many good tools and options nowadays that you can use TeamCity with Visual Studio if you want. You can use TFS. You can use whatever. You should really get out of that mindset of thinking that you have to live with the mainline branch breaking. There's absolutely no reason for it with the modern tools.
Yeah.
How you set up that whole food chain is different depending on your source control system, your CI system, and everything else. And I think Mr. Hicks here is going to give a great presentation on that.
I will
at
be.
some point.
We have abandoned the traditional trunk and we've gone to the feature branches. And I can say that so far I have been beyond happy with it. To me, there are those things that shift in your development, and they're very few and far between. Going from CVS to Subversion was like, yes, it was better, but I could care less. The distributed version control, the merging, the branching, certainly pushes you way. So, all right, and back to Nimret.
So the IT ops view, kind of speak to that a little bit. Some of the nice thing from an IT ops perspective on implementing some of these things, the releases are solid, all the time. They don't have to worry about where they get releases from. They know there's a specific spot that they get releases from. Ideally, your releases have excellent documentation. Tools like Maven, I would assume IV, and some of the other tools have a lot of pre-generated, nicely formatted documentation to generate for you. Configuration systems, ideally, I'll talk to that in a little bit in the next slide here, but ideally there are, again, tools and processes in place where IT ops people are actually leveraging those instead of just writing things down on stickies or just knowledge that's in somebody's head somewhere or something like that. And then from an architectural perspective, hopefully the systems are being designed ideally in a way where you don't have to do a deployment Saturday evening at midnight or something like that because of the fact that there's people using the system and you can only shut it down during that maintenance window. There's ways around that. So hopefully the system's architected maybe in a stateless manner or something like that that doesn't require that. Which also scales quite nicely actually. So here's an example kind of illustrating what I'm talking about. So again, everything's in the binary repository, that's kind of where everything starts, and hopefully after that you're really just pushing stuff up the environment chain, so to speak. So in a typical sort of scenario, you might have a QA environment, which is sort of the formal place where QA might do their formal QA validation and testing and everything. And then you might perhaps have a staging environment after that, which essentially for all effects and purposes is production. But maybe it's not open to the world or something like that, if you're just doing a switchover kind of a deployment. And then of course prod is where the production stuff actually lives. But again, the important thing to note here is that stuff is just being pushed up each environment, but it's the same artifact that's being pushed up each environment. And so you got your centralized virtual environments, maybe you have a cloud or something like that, or whatever it is that you have your environments, whether it's internal within your network or something. And then ideally, all your configuration information for all your infrastructure is being stored somewhere. And I'll be talking about some of the tools that can kind of help you leverage, doing that. So again, this is bringing the same sort of thinking to the DevOps space, where instead of DevOps people actually monkeying around on systems or just manually editing them and modifying them, they're using tools which store the configuration information somewhere. So for example, the configuration information could be stored in source control. And you might want to actually see, who's been making changes to that and when for auditability or something like that. Here's some of the tools that we've used in the past for doing some of this stuff. Puppet and Chef are kind of the two big boys out there, so to speak. CF Engine's been around since the 90s or something like that. It's kind of one of the older tools. Puppet and Chef, they're both Ruby. I think Puppet uses a DSL, but you can use Ruby directly with it. Vagrant is a tool for managing VMs. And it's got some really nice features around, like even just setting up dev environments. And again, the idea here is that instead of actually going and just installing pieces of software, whether it's Apache and Tomcat or whatever you need to, you're setting up scripts which will do all that for you in an automated fashion to a new environment. So you're not actually manually doing that, the tool is.
So this domain, the other side of the wall, the ITSM, data center, whatever, has not been absent tools. And you're, to some extent, talking about tools that have emerged along with a lot of the open source work, System Center, not. But, there's HP Matrix, there's some ungodly stuff out there. BMC, what's on the other side of the wall, we think we know, just like they think they know what's on your side of the wall.
Sure.
And they don't actually sit around waiting for things to deploy, for instance. They're not just, sitting on their hands, waiting for some more code to move. They've got hundreds or thousands of boxes. They're on the edge of their storage capability. They're getting regular requests, like several times a day. Yeah, I need this much new F5, and I'm like, and they're just pulling it out of, you can imagine.
Yeah.
Watching, trying to get things back. And some of these organizations, depending on the sizes and what's being asked of, they're sitting on the top of a needle.
Yeah.
All the money's been spent on development, and there's this weird idea that we're a product development company, but over the recent years, we've been becoming hosting companies and investing nothing in hosting.
Right.
And killing those people. So don't be surprised if your answers are not their answers.
Oh no,
and that-
absolutely.
I mean,
I'm just pointing out that.
No, I'm not saying this is all wrong. I'm just saying that this is a conversation more than it is a bunch of tools.
Yes, it again goes back to
Yeah.
process and
Yeah.
cross-functional,
Yeah.
organizational changes.
Yeah. We get new tools shoved on us constantly. I'm in the development operations group, and we're trying to drive essentially the release train, like the agile release train out of Leffingwell's scaled agile framework. It's all the same conversation. Everyone wants their words to win. But at the end of the day, there's an awful lot of talking that's not happening. Development is sure they know how ops should change, and vice versa. You got to talk to each other.
Yeah.
Here's the key point about these tools is that your environment should be treated just like you would any other important IP asset. So your configuration is code effectively, right?
Yeah.
I don't really care what tool. That's why there's this whole
Right.
list of them,
Right.
right? The what's not okay is to go into an environment and you say, well, we've got environments in production that I cannot replicate. I don't know what's on them. I don't know what got there. If that machine went away, then the whole thing would go down and we couldn't come back.
Yeah.
That's the key message, not the tool, right?
Yeah.
And that's the cultural shift is, you talk to somebody, you say, well, I don't want you logging in as root anymore. I want you to go through some other process or tool. And that's just this huge cultural gap. And it's on the same scale as shifting
Yeah.
from manual to automated test. Like if you think about thematically, it's the same key point, right?
Yeah.
So where you go with that, cool.
Yeah, we had
It's just-
development hand us what they think we needed. And having watched a demo and been sold by HP, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's not due diligence.
No, and that's nobody. I don't think anybody's saying that. Like, because these tools, like for example, they all vary by platform. You know, CF Engine's been around for like 10 years. They're on a new version. Puppet, Chef are a lot stronger in Unix than Windows.
Yeah.
So some people say, "Oh, I want one tool," and it's like, well, you probably want one for each, right?
Yeah, a lot of this
But-
stuff you could solve with the tools you had.
Well, the point,
The cultural challenges and just the need to converse. We didn't buy any new tools at this one organization where we were managing 140 apps on shared infrastructure, and we were just a machine. And we went from on fire, you know, constant problems in the maintenance window to a few minutes for deployment, customers becoming the bottleneck. So it's not nearly, in my mind, a lot of the time, so much about the tools as it is the conversation. and
absolutely,
problem solving.
and it's the process and the automation is really kind of where you're getting towards.
Yeah.
This is just a list of tools
Yep.
that can help you get there. But
Yep.
you may have other tools, like you said. I mean, this
Yeah.
is IT ops has been around for a pretty long time. So
All right, so next steps, how do we get started? Early on, someone mentioned, either on the sticky or through speaking about it, approaching these things through new applications. Is that gentleman right? So there's two ways to go about this. Either you're going to do a platform modernization. You're gonna try and pitch. Look, we're gonna make our process better on an existing platform. This is fairly tough because you're really not talking about a greenfield thing. You're talking about approaching the money you already have sunk. You already have a lot of things with it. So if you're going to attempt this, you probably need to do it while you're doing something else. Like we're doing a UI rewrite, or we're doing a portion of this. If you're going to be introducing these processes on big existing platforms. It turns out it is much easier to start with a greenfields application and say, look, we're going to be automating this, because there's a lot of excitement around it. People aren't as concerned about exactly how the process is lined up, and a lot of times this is where you start to get it into those bigger, more complicated applications that exist, is by saying, look, we're going to do it this way for this process, for this project. We're going to try and get our continuous delivery up a notch. And then, once they've seen that as an ROI, back up into platform modernization, right? So, I'm just saying this because everybody's got a different place they're coming from, right? Some people are coming from, hey, I got a great project that I'm ready to hit. I think we want to do it the right way. Most of us, I think, are coming from, there's a lot of suck, and I want to figure out how to not do it. Okay. And also, you want to start with test automation coverage of some variety. How many folks have been through a code base that had 0 unit tests on the unit test shift, right? Nothing more painful than trying to get those first unit tests in and then get people to accept that they can't fail. Because you're effectively asking people to ditch everything that they've known to this point, to before this point, and accept that these are going to be beneficial. A lot of people resist. DevOps as well. It's a lot of this is resistance, inertia. I've always done this. I know how to develop. I've done it for 20 years. Really, it's a lot of the stuff that I've done. A lot of the best effect has been doing it, showing it to people, and them going, "Oh, that does make my day better." That's what we want to get to. All these things make your day better. We need to get people to buy into that, and these are ways to sort of get started in your organization.
So this is kind of the typical engagement that we see out there. So typically we sort of go in and do a little bit of an assessment, kind of see where they're at, do a sort of a gap analysis maybe to see what the current state of affairs is. Do they have any kind of unit testing in place at all or not? Do they have CI or not? And then kind of where they want to get to. And then we'll do an application inventory, kind of understand their systems, see what kind of tooling it is they're developing. Is it mobile, server-side stuff, whatever. And then we'll come in with a bunch of tool recommendations, some of the things that we just talked about. We also do training. This is Datacron Group, obviously. We do like group learning, executive management, baselines. you know, a lot of the work that we do is around not just helping out with projects, but also disseminating information, best practices, kind of best of breed tools that are out there and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, on the execution part here, that's, the funny thing is, we keep hearing, can you help us with this project? Oh, our processes need a bump. So it's, you know, we come in and they know what we're targeting. And this is either the management or sometimes the line guys are just like, please help us get this in. So some of that is the lead by example, get in there, help do an execute on this, execute well, show value for the company. You know, back to the point about you need to show value for this. So.
And sometimes actually we found it you know, beneficial for companies sometimes to just get an outsider involved. And sometimes, you know, two groups within the same organization are not maybe even on speaking terms, you know, with each other or something like that. And so sometimes it helps just to get somebody who hasn't been exposed to that, somewhat impartial, to come in and talk about the real issues and not the emotions associated with the issues. So these are kind of some of the things that we bring to the table. We've been doing this for a while, the processes, the tools and everything. We've got established architecture, infrastructure, experience with this sort of stuff. As I mentioned, training and pairing, that's the kind of stuff that we really enjoy. And we like to kind of go in, get some of these processes and tools and solves set up, get continuous delivery set up in an organization so that they're actually delivering software that is meeting the business goals and the needs on a continuous basis. And then there's a whole bunch of accounts that we have. Add something
Yeah,
to that, Will?
just, I mean, a lot of you guys are developers, and I hear often people come in, they're like, oh, I want to do all this stuff, but I don't know how to get my management to buy in. We have a ton of material that's targeted at executives on how to make this stuff happen, how to build a case for it, how to get the budget put together, you know, how to partner to make it all happen. So if you're not sure how to get rolling, but you think it's something that maybe, you know, is worth starting to have that conversation, feel free to grab us and, you know, we can talk about maybe how to start getting your management excited about, you know, getting some of these tools and some of this stuff put together.
How much are you running into architectures from hell that essentially are the first thing to take care of? I mean, you talk about stateless, the API economy is coming, and you can't deploy this thing over a weekend because
Yeah.
there's subsystems made out of subsystems spanning so many boxes, and developers are asking the IT people, how does this even work?
Yeah.
And now the APIs are version.
Yeah.
You know, to a certain extent, kind of part of what we do when we talk to folks about it is we sort of say that these older apps are kind of like your haircut in high school, which you thought was really cool back then.
Yeah.
You know, the mullet looked really awesome, right?
Sometimes it's the flagship that looks like this.
Yeah, exactly. And so then it's just sort of, you know, sort of the old joke about the wall of China, you know, it starts with a couple of bricks. And that's really the only thing that this boils down to is, and that's where sometimes we can have an executive conversation about the portfolio of projects. So for example, one of our big engagements, which was almost a 2-year-long engagement, there were about 100 apps that they had that were all running on Dynamo, old Dynamo JHTML stuff, right? We broke it up into chunks, and we just started converting chunk at a time and modernizing, updating it, bringing it up to code and to spec. And it was actually a very seamless process in the big scheme of things. They got immediate value because deployments went from being like a multi-day, all-hands nightmare that would roll back more often than not to something that you could do seamlessly during the middle of the day. So they got that, they got way better performance, they got some cleanup on the HTML, so they switched everything over from, so I mean, like, there were a lot of benefits, but it's, and there is really no short answer for it beyond you gotta do the work. And that's where sometimes, you know, bringing in somebody else to kind of clean up the garage, as it were, you know, like I would
Seeing everyone in a hurry to jump on continuous deployment or DevOps or the agile release train. If what you're trying to deploy is so bad, you don't need to reach any further, you need to do some house cleaning kind of on your architecture, yeah.
Yep.
And it's just funny that, you know, it's like the executive on the plane reads about this cool new thing and we gotta have it, and I'm like, no, you gotta bite the bullet and fix this stuff.
Yep. And that's where like maybe your current staff can then focus on the
Yeah.
feature set and you have somebody come in to help you out
Yeah.
with the cleanup. I mean, if you think back to those slides, showing all the different pieces of tech and getting the pipeline all put together, there's a lot of stuff there. And that's where having somebody come in who's
Yeah.
been there, you know, knows all the little fiddly bits of XML and other config files to get all stitched together, that's nice, you know. Cool. Anybody else have any other questions? All right. Thank you guys. You guys
Are
did a
you
great
guys
job.
posting the
Thanks.
slides or sending
The
them out?
video's
or-
gonna be up for sure.
Yep.
Okay,
Say
yeah,
say goodbye.
Voila.
Say bye to the video.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.